The compelling story is set during the tumultuous period of World War II, specifically in May of 1944, where a Japanese ship is diligently sailing in the vast middle of the expansive ocean, carrying a significant number of prisoners of war. Among all the foreign prisoners, a merchant named Saito is arrested on charges of treason, and the plan is to take Saito back to Japan to be executed. Two guards then appear and bring Saito to the commander on the ship. After meeting him, the officer looks at Saito and says that anyone who betrays their own country can never be forgiven, even if it means facing the death penalty. Not long after, several soldiers appear again, this time bringing an English prisoner named Bronson, who was caught trying to escape. To punish them both, the commander then orders his men to shackle their legs. Now, while Saito and Bronson are unable to do anything, suddenly an attack is launched by several airplanes. Bronson and Saito take full advantage of this unexpected opportunity to try to escape from their captors, which inevitably leads to a fierce and prolonged fight with the soldiers. In the end, both of them manage to escape by jumping off the ship just moments before the submarine is seen firing its missile. A few hours later, Bronson survives, and he is now seen carrying the injured Saito to a remote island. The next day, Saito wakes up to find his leg still chained to Bronson's. From there, Saito tries to wake Bronson, but since Bronson doesn't wake up, he ends up approaching the body of a soldier who is also stranded on the beach. Saito drags himself over to take the soldier's weapon, but just as he succeeds, Bronson suddenly wakes up and attacks him. The two then become involved in a fierce fight, so intense that they don't notice a terrifying creature approaching them. As they fight on the edge of the beach, Saito's injured leg catches the creature's attention, and it immediately grabs Bronson and tries to drag him away. Fortunately, Saito, who saw the mysterious figure, quickly fired his gun, causing the creature to flee. Both of them now realize that there seems to be something far more dangerous on this island than the hatred between them, so they decide to make peace in order to survive. But even though there's no longer any problem with Bronson, it seems that Saito still can't come to terms with what has happened to him. Saito spends some time in silence, deep in thought, until he suddenly tries to commit suicide. Fortunately, Bronson quickly stops him. From there, Bronson then takes the only remaining bullet from the pistol and gives it to Saito as a symbol that the gun in his hand is useless without any bullets. Bronson asks Saito to unite and think about how they can fight the creature that will likely return. The two of them eventually find some supplies that have washed up on the beach. Bronson finds a backpack, some cigarettes, and also coffee. But what disappoints Bronson is when he finds the corpse of a young man, who turns out to be one of his comrades. While crying, Bronson says that he was just an innocent boy who had to die after being tortured by the Japanese. Saito doesn't really understand what Bronson is saying, but he can deeply feel the profound pain of losing someone very close to him, a feeling that resonates strongly within his own heart. As night begins to fall, the two of them set up camp to rest, but because their legs are still chained together, Bronson can't move freely. The relationship between Bronson and Saito is actually still strained, especially for Bronson, who still holds a grudge against the Japanese. So when Saito offers Bronson some crab they had roasted, Bronson accidentally drops it in the sand. Seeing this kind gesture, Saito then thoughtfully gives his own prepared crab to Bronson. At first, Bronson understandably refuses, but since Saito persistently insists and carefully leaves the food right next to him, Bronson eventually takes it. From there, Bronson started to feel more comfortable with Saito's presence. Bronson then decided to formally introduce himself. The same goes for Saito, who, although he struggled, eventually managed to understand what Bronson was saying and told him that he usually goes by Saito. But the one thing that made things difficult for both of them was the chain that bound their legs together. At that precise moment, Bronson then diligently tried to improvise a makeshift tool in order to effectively cut through the formidable chain. At first, the rudimentary tool simply couldn't manage to break the incredibly strong chain, but when Saito thoughtfully suggested hitting the chain with considerable force near the very end of his foot, the stubborn chain finally came completely loose. Now, it's Bronson's turn, and when Saito asked for the tool, Bronson immediately felt nervous because Saito's swing could miss and hit his foot. But since he truly had no other viable choice available to him, he ultimately and reluctantly decided to place his trust in Saito. A profound sense of immense joy then completely filled both of them, and together they celebrated with great enthusiasm as if they had both been truly and utterly freed from the heavy shackles of life. But in the very midst of their profound happiness, Saito suddenly felt as if something unseen was intently watching them, observing their every move. From there, the two of them armed themselves and began to check the surrounding area. While investigating the mysterious footprints, their attention was suddenly diverted when they heard someone's voice. It turned out that the voice came from two Japanese soldiers along with a prisoner of war. At this point, Bronson began to suspect that Saito was going to betray him. But Bronson's suspicions proved unfounded when Saito handed him his knife and told Bronson to hide immediately. From there, Saito then returned and pretended to be asleep. When he was found, Saito asked them not to shoot him. The two soldiers didn't suspect anything because they assumed Saito was probably a Japanese soldier who was also stranded on the island. Meanwhile, Bronson, who was watching from a distance, was unknowingly being approached by a creature from the side. Fortunately, the creature didn't attack him because as soon as Bronson surrendered and closed his eyes, the creature suddenly disappeared. On the other hand, the Japanese soldier, who had been chatting earlier, suddenly became suspicious when he noticed signs of someone else's presence in Saito's camp. Amid the tension, one of them then stood behind Saito. Meanwhile, another began to tell a story that before their ship sank, there was news about a traitor and also a fugitive from the enemy side who were chained together. Well, Saito's identity was finally revealed after they saw the ankle bracelet from the old chain shackle that was still attached. When asked where the fugitive was, Saito replied that he was already dead, while pointing toward a grave, which was the grave of his young soldier acquaintance Bronson. In a moment of desperation, a roar suddenly echoed across the entire island, causing everyone to fall silent. A prisoner brought by the Japanese soldiers then said that the sound came from a legendary figure known as the Fishman. From there, one of the soldiers ordered his comrade to go check it out. The Japanese soldier then started walking and almost discovered Bronson, who was hiding. However, because he was already distracted by the mysterious sound, the soldier reluctantly continued his inspection. Eventually, he arrived at a cave. The soldier's scream then echoed throughout the island, making the remaining troops think it was Saito's doing. Fortunately, Bronson managed to take advantage of the opportunity to save Saito, suddenly appearing and attacking him. Now, just as Bronson was about to finish off the enemy with his pistol, a severed head was suddenly thrown toward them, terrifying Bronson, Saito, and the prisoner of war. From behind the bushes, Bronson and Saito then witnessed how the Fishman appeared and killed the wounded soldier, as well as the prisoner who tried to escape. Realizing that they were also being targeted, Bronson and Saito tried to escape into the forest. They were briefly separated, which resulted in Bronson getting trapped and coming face to face with the Fishman. Fortunately, Saito managed to find Bronson, where he attacked the Fishman with his katana and quickly took Bronson away. But unfortunately, while they were running, both of them ended up falling into the forest. The next day, Saito woke up badly injured and separated from Bronson. Saito had a wound with a branch visibly lodged in his chest. While enduring excruciating pain, Saito then stood up and struggled to pull out the branch with great effort. Meanwhile, Bronson, who had also regained consciousness, was now seen lying on a large tree trunk suspended over the river. As Bronson tried to move, his body suddenly lost balance and he ended up falling into the water. Fortunately, Bronson managed to survive after he made it to the riverbank. On the other hand, Saito, who was now able to walk, then picked up the katana he had brought earlier. Although the two were separated, they both had the same goal, to keep moving upstream in order to find the top of the waterfall. Sometime later, the scream of a fishman echoed throughout the forest and was heard by both of them. Realizing that they were still being hunted, Bronson and Saito became alert while continuing to move. Saito seemed to have managed to leave the river area, but unfortunately, he still hadn't found Bronson. Meanwhile, Bronson, who was trying to cross the waterfall, decided to stop and rest for a moment. But just as he lay down, he sensed the presence of something right beside him. When he turned, it turned out Bronson was face to face with a large crocodile. With no other choice, Bronson tried to stay calm and let the animal observe him for a moment before it eventually went back into the river. Still in shock after encountering the crocodile, Bronson got up and continued on his journey. He then arrived quite close to the very top of the magnificent waterfall, where Bronson, from a considerable distance, clearly saw the mysterious creature. It turned out to be none other than the elusive fishman, who was diligently applying some sort of healing substance to the painful wound that Saito had previously inflicted upon him. But unfortunately for the fishman, not very long after he had carefully treated his grievous wounds, a large predatory crocodile suddenly and unexpectedly appeared from the murky waters and swiftly devoured him entirely. But it turned out that the one who died wasn't the fishman but rather the crocodile, which was split into two. That truly horrifying and utterly terrifying sight profoundly affected Bronson, and when the monstrous creature let out a deafening roar, its piercing scream was so incredibly loud that Saito, who was at that very moment walking through the dense ancient forest, could distinctly hear it from a considerable distance away. As Saito was walking through the forest, he accidentally stumbled upon something strange. When he checked it out, it turned out to be a corpse tied to a tree. The shock was so great that Saito fell into a hole, where he also found the head of another fishman. While observing, Saito realized that it seemed like the creature could be killed. From there, he got out and tried to find something he could use as a weapon. From the body of the hanging corpse, Saito found a pistol complete with bullets. Armed with his katana and pistol, Saito then decided to pursue the fishman. On his journey, he came across the wreckage of a plane lying right beneath a waterfall. Curious, Saito tried to inspect the part of the plane that was almost completely submerged. As night approached, Bronson, who also arrived at the waterfall, found the same part of the plane's fuselage that Saito had discovered. However, before inspecting the plane, Bronson chose to make a spear from pieces of old metal. Once he had completely finished his task, Bronson then entered the waiting plane, where he meticulously discovered several important items such as a bright flare gun, sturdy matches, a pack of cigarettes, and various other miscellaneous objects, including a dangerous bomb that was firmly stuck within the plane's sturdy wing. After that, Bronson decided to rest and started to light a cigarette. While he was enjoying his smoke, he suddenly heard footsteps approaching him, which turned out to be Saito. At first, Bronson thought Saito wanted to ask for a cigarette, but instead, Saito slowly asked Bronson to follow him, as Saito apparently wanted to show him something. The two of them then went together into a cave, where Saito had apparently found the egg of the fishman creature. Upon learning this, Bronson planned to destroy the egg. However, Saito warned Bronson that if they destroyed the egg, the mother would likely become even angrier at the two of them. Their intense argument finally ended when Bronson declared that he had an ingenious idea. Bronson then revealed the powerful bomb he had discovered earlier, explaining that they could strategically use it to utterly destroy the monster's sprawling nest. After successfully bringing the bomb, Bronson meticulously tried to open the stubborn fuse at the very end of it. But since they were experiencing considerable trouble, the only practical way to open the resistant cap was by using the sturdy axe from the plane. Because of that, after they agreed, the two of them decided to go out together. Once outside, Bronson quickly fired a flare while Saito kept watch around the plane. Unfortunately, just as Bronson was trying to get the axe from the cockpit, the creature suddenly appeared in front of Saito. Bronson finally managed to pull the axe out of the plane, after which he joined Saito to confront the creature. Unfortunately, the flare that had been fired earlier was already starting to fade, causing the creature to disappear into the darkness. From there, the two of them quickly returned to the cave to finish their work. Once inside, Saito stood guard again while Bronson tried to remove the safety lock using the axe. When Bronson finally managed to do it, the monster appeared again and this time tried to attack Bronson. A truly brutal and intense fight broke out, forcing Saito to quickly shoot the dangerous creature directly right in the head to save Bronson, who was very badly and severely injured. But since the monster wasn't dead yet, Saito then decided to change his target by shooting the hanging egg, which resulted in the creature losing its offspring. Amidst the scene of the fish person looking at their dead baby, Saito quickly ran toward Bronson and tried to help him. However, because he was seriously injured, Bronson was forced to hand over all his belongings and ask Saito to get as far away as possible. With no other choice, Saito then left his friend behind and exited the cave. At first, Bronson couldn't activate the bomb even though he had struck it with an axe. But fortunately, he remembered Saito's idea when he cut the chain binding his leg, so Bronson quickly tried it once more and then...
See you in hell, bitch!
Even after being hit by such a massive explosion, it turns out that creature still isn't dead. Hearing its roar, Saito then started running through the forest until he finally arrived at the edge of the beach. Saito, who was already extremely exhausted, then decided to face the creature one last time. Saito planned to trap the fishman by using the corpse of a Japanese soldier. As soon as the creature arrived at the beach and saw someone kneeling in front of it, it immediately attacked. But in reality, the fishman had already fallen into a trap where Saito, who was hiding in the sand, suddenly emerged while drawing his katana. Just as he was about to finish off the creature, Saito suddenly felt unable to go through with it after seeing his opponent lying there helpless. From there, Saito then picked up a flare. However, as soon as he turned around, he saw that the fishman had disappeared into the bushes. With his body covered in wounds, Saito then tried to fire the flare he had found. But unfortunately, when he fired it, the flare turned out to be broken, which made Saito feel as if he had lost all hope of surviving. A few hours later, Saito was found and taken by American soldiers onto their ship. After regaining consciousness, Saito was then interrogated by an officer who was accompanied by a Japanese language interpreter. The officer asked if Saito knew someone named Bronson. At first, Saito refused to reveal what had happened to Bronson. However, because Saito considered Bronson a friend, he eventually agreed to tell his story with Bronson, including revealing that there was no one left alive on the island. After finishing, Saito then looked out the window, and as the ship he was on moved away from the shore, Saito saw a sight. He discovered that there were still some fish people roaming the island. So that was the storyline of the film Monster Island, which was released this year. Hopefully you were entertained by this story summary. With that, I'll take my leave. Thank you to everyone who has watched, and see you again next time. Far, 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 far away.